We are going to get started. I am so delighted to welcome Erica Dhawan. She is the author of Digital Body Language. If you haven't read the book yet, I encourage it. Lots of for me. But Erica is a globally recognized expert, leadership expert, and keynote speaker, helping organizations and leaders innovate faster and further together. Erica has spoken worldwide to organizations and enterprises that range from the World Economic Forum to US and global Fortune 500 companies, associations, sports teams, and government institutions. Named as one of the top management experts around the world by global gurus, she is the founder and CEO of Cotential, a company that has helped leaders and teams leverage 21st century collaboration skills globally. Her writings have appeared in dozens of publications, including Fast Company and Harvard Business Review. She has an MPA from Harvard Kennedy School, MBA from MIT Sloan, and a BS from Wharton School. So Erica, thank you so very, very much for joining us here today with this extremely timely topic, as we've all been dealing with how to show up digitally, because our lives as coaches have been transformed by the pandemic, putting us behind the screen instead of face to face with many of the people we work with. So thank you so much for your time today. Erica is going to save some time at the end to address questions. So, if you want to put them in the chat while we go, whatever. CB, yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Does everybody know that this is being brought to them by the Association of Corporate Executive Coaches? And if you're interested in membership, please go to the ACEC-association.org website, and we would love to talk to you.
Absolutely. So thank you, CB, for our commercial break. We appreciate that. Anything else you'd like to add before we jump in?
No, we'll mention it again later.
Yes, we will. And for the benefit of those who can't be here with us live, I want you to know we are recording. The recording is going to be made available to those who registered for a 2-month period of time. Okay. So, and that has something to do with royalties that Erica has to pay on leaving this out there. So just know you've got a 2-month window once we get this up and posted. Okay, everybody? Awesome. Erica, I'll put myself on mute. You take it away.
Thank you so much, Holly. Thank you, CB. I am truly honored to get the opportunity to host this session today, sponsored by ACEC, that will really allow us all to have a conversation. So if we think about the last
Erica, I just want to say, because this is about communication, it would be great if people put themselves on the screen versus their name.
Great point. If it's possible for you, please go ahead and go on video if you can. And if you can't, don't worry, because this is going to be a highly interactive session where I'm going to show that digital body language is not just about how we show up on a video screen. It's about how we call on people to share their perspectives, how we engage in the chat. And so just to highlight, during this session today, my goal is to have us all engage throughout the session, not only at the end, but feel free to share questions in the chat in real time. I will try to answer them as I go so that we can have a true conversation today. And in the spirit of connection, I may call on people at certain moments to share, to connect, to share their perspective on what we're discussing as well, to really allow us all to, read the room and get everyone's insights in the conversation. So thank you, CB, for mentioning that. Now let's talk about where we are, right? So we're 18 months into this massive shift. We've all seen more disruption, yet more innovation in the coaching industry than in perhaps the last 10 years. All of you have had to reimagine how you connect with your clients, with your colleagues in this room. Digital tools that got little traction for years are now business requirements, not only for productivity and collaboration, but also for social connection, for team workshop and facilitation design, and so much more. And I believe that the question we have to answer now is no longer simply how will we adapt to our new normal, but more importantly, as coaches, how will we create a better normal? How will we make sure that we don't revert back to pre-pandemic behaviors? We use this time to really ask ourselves, what has worked better? How do we adapt? How do we grow our businesses? How do we deepen the world of coaching because of the shifts of the last 18 months? And in today's session, my goal is to really bring to life a critical skill that I believe is not only table stakes when it comes to effective coaching today, but also a critical skill that we must be able to bring to our leaders, to our clients, to teams that we work with in our modern day age. So in today's session, I'm going to talk about the skill that I've been studying for the last 6 years, well before the pandemic, called digital body language. And at first, you may think that digital body language is about video skills, but it's about so much more. Digital body language is about the cues and signals we send that make up the subtext of our messages and really allow us to signal what we feel and how we connect with others today. Just like we knew of body language as furrowed brows and a firm handshake or a lean in a sales conversation, it hasn't disappeared in a digital world. Whether we know it or not, we are sending cues in our emails, in our text messages, in our IMs, and in our video calls. I want to start with a short story that will bring to life why this skill is so incredibly important today. This is a true story between two colleagues, Sarah and John. And the white box is an email exchange between Sarah and her boss, John. And the black box is what they actually meant by their email exchanges. One Wednesday afternoon, Sarah has an idea for a project. So she shoots off an email to John saying, quick thought, what do you think of this idea for the deliverable? What she really meant was, I have a great idea. It's not fleshed out yet, but I'd love to get your thoughts before I spend more time on it. At about 8 p.m. that night, after a long day of video calls, John, her boss, gets this note and he's confused. He thought the deliverable was done. He didn't understand why Sarah was sending the message now. He writes, how would this fit in? Doesn't seem like you thought this through, ... What he really meant was, I don't understand what you mean by this. I need more context from you. You're closer to the work than I am. Now, Sarah reads this on her phone while she's putting her 3 kids to bed, and she's frazzled, even though they've worked together for 6 years. She can't read the tone and body language of John's message. She spends 35 minutes crafting a structured email with bold and underlined headings, changing the title from quick thought to deliverable changes. She felt good. It wasn't ready to be a change. She felt rushed to have an answer. John gets this note and thinks to himself, this is pretty great. He doesn't say that. That's in the black box. That's what's in his head. He just shoots off some more questions to Sarah. Now Sarah thinks John's questions are passive aggressive. She waits until the next morning. She ruminates that night and writes, can we chat about this before our team meeting tomorrow? What she really felt was 5 exclamation points. This isn't productive. We need a better way to collaborate. John gets this note and thinks to himself, I want to get on the same page well before that team meeting. So he writes, can you send me your thoughts in writing? What he really meant was, let's get on the same page before so we can bring other colleagues in before that team meeting tomorrow. Sarah at this point is about to have a heart attack. What could have been a 15-minute phone or video call took 5 hours of time, stress, and fear over a 12-hour period. Now, I want to take a minute and ask every single one of you, if you've ever been in this situation before, all 38 of you in this call, go into the chat right now and join me and say yes. And tell me, who are you in this story? Are you Sarah? Are you John? Or are you both? I'm going to give everyone a minute to go into the chat and share with us, who are you in this story? If you think about your daily scenarios, we'll hear from Amy and Audrey. Please go ahead and share. Let's hear from a few more folks in the chat. I recently ran a study that showed that on average, an employee is wasting up to 4 hours a week on poor, unclear, or confusing digital communication. We all know that roughly 3/4 of face-to-face collaboration is our nonverbal body language, the pacing, the pauses, the gestures, the tone. But prior to the pandemic, already up to 70% of teamwork and also coaching, a lot of it was virtual. We were on phone calls. We were doing calls before the live meetings and workshops. That's just shot up to 100%. And what it really requires us to do is reimagine how we connect and collaborate. Again, understanding that body language has not disappeared. It is just transformed in our digital and hybrid world. And we have to understand that we are sending different signals and cues and read others' cues in our modern construct. From the world of video calls, where it's not natural to see our own camera on the screen to try to read others. Research shows that when we freeze, we are more likely, or when we freeze on the other side, we are more likely to signal less empathy to someone neurologically than we would face-to-face. And we can't control a lot of these challenges. The asynchronicity of communication can make it hard. It feels like we have to chase down people for conversations, and multitasking is at all-time highs. How do we create that culture of true presence? Now, I would argue that the last 18 months has allowed us to be more geographically inclusive around who we can coach, who we can engage, less visually biased to just extrovert, introvert, or only allowing those that, looked like senior executives or of a similar gender, race, or culture to be able to sell to certain clients. We've been able to break a lot of those boundaries. And at the same time, be more inclusive in how we connect. I'll never forget pre-pandemic, I was on a conference call. 3 of us were remote, 3 people were in the office, and I was trying to coach the group. It wasn't until the 26th minute of a 30-minute meeting that someone in the office said, "Does anyone on the phone have something to share?" We had been excluded the entire time. Now, because of that geographical inclusivity, we've been able to use these skills and experiment in how we digitally connect. But at the same time, we all know it's hard. We're more likely to misunderstand each other quickly with a lack of tone and body language. Sometimes speaking freely, tone can be misperceived in a negative way. Passive aggressiveness can be assumed even when it's not true. Even one study found that if you have multiple typos in an email, there's a negative perception of you, especially when there's not a prior relationship that's much higher, and we are judged in different ways. And last but not least, we can walk away faster from relationships. Technology can create masks, and it's harder to actually deepen that trust and connection if we don't understand how to use digital body language effectively with our clients and colleagues. So how do we bypass these challenges? How do we build that trust and connection no matter the distance? Well, I believe it's through a skill called digital body language. Digital body language are the cues and signals we send in all of our digital communication that clarify the subtext of our messages. Again, this is not just about video skills. This is about how we connect in email, text, IM, in all the formats, even in hybrid meetings. I'd argue in face-to-face meetings today, with screens up, with phones out, our digital body language is now integrated with our traditional body language. In fact, some research is finding that our digital body language is changing face-to-face body language. We're more likely to look down at our phones than have direct eye contact. In a hybrid meeting, we're connecting with those on screens and in the room. Now, let me give you some examples of digital body language. And as I share these examples, I want you to go into the chat and share what are some of the signals that you've had to read into, or you want to better analyze or understand in our modern ways of working and coaching today. And then I also want you to go into the chat and share, where have you struggled the most with digital body language? Whether it's not getting your clients to come up on camera or email confusion, whatever it may be, go ahead and share, where have you struggled? And the point is, so that we can really tackle some of your most critical challenges and opportunities in the ways we work today. Let me give you some examples of signals from the choice of communication medium. Did we choose to email, to call, to video call, to Slack? These are not trivial decisions. They are cues of complexity, urgency, priority. They help others know how thoughtfully they should respond, how quickly they should respond, and give others a sense of how familiar their trust level is with one another. CC, BCC, forward reply all. Again, these are not trivial. These are the new measures of inclusion and exclusion. They help people make meaning. I like to say, are you creating a culture of endless reply alls where no one wants to respond, or really clarifying if you're on the 2 line, you need to respond. If you're on the CC line, no need to respond. Instead, really just make sure and let us know. And we assume that you've read the conversation to avoid endless email overwhelm. Word choice. I like to say reading messages carefully is the new listening, and writing clearly is the new empathy, especially based on power levels. If a senior leader writes, "We need to talk, ... For some, that can be a simple conversation. For others, especially more junior, that can be alarming or anxiety producing with the lack of context, even response times. One quick tip, if you send a quick email recap within 30 minutes of a video or phone call, it's like the new virtual handshake. It creates a sense of alignment that I hear you, I value you, and I understand you. Instead of, waiting 2 days later. Again, these little things make a big difference. Video calls. How did you really design for engagement on your video call? I like to say we have to think more like TV show hosts than office hosts. A TV show host has always had to truly prepare in advance and think from a screen. They have a clear agenda. They call on people to share. They cut people off. If they're going too long, they use these tools in the right way and remember to think and summarize what they heard to show people that they are valued and they are respected for their time. Use of punctuation. Now, one study showed if you put a period at the end of a text, digital natives think that means passive aggressiveness. And digital adapters, those that feel more like immigrants to the world of digital body language, think that's just good grammar. I'll talk a little bit about this. I'll never forget I had one client who sent me an email saying something vague like, on our phone call tomorrow, I need to discuss the budget. And all of a sudden I ruminated about it. I thought that meant she couldn't pay me, even though I had already started the work. I was so frustrated all night. I got onto the call and she said, oh, I just wanted you to remind me what you were charging me for this. And so again, even simple things like that can cause a different level of confusion today. Meeting times. Did you start on time? Did you end on time? I like to say ending 5 minutes early is like the new art of respect, and even emojis. For some, it's friendly. For others, it's immature. So now we're going to do a little bit of a group discussion. We have many people engaging in the chat, which is great. I want every single one of you to go in and share, where have you struggled when it comes to coaching with digital body language? And we're hearing from some folks like Rick mentioning too many reply all emails, Jane mentioning using sarcasm in a virtual setting. This is very difficult. Humor and sarcasm can get lost. So it's important to make sure that you are only using it in situations where at least the voice of tone can be read, so people can hear a giggle or a laugh, or if there's a very high trust relationship. You want to be careful when there's a low trust relationship in these situations. I'd love for a few folks to come off mute so we can hear some color around these. Paula, could you go off mute and tell us and share a little more color on what you shared in the chat related to where you've struggled? Paula Golden.
Yes, hi, thank you, Eric.
And then we'll go to Liz and Jim next, just so you know the order. But Paula, go ahead.
Okay, so I find that more often than not, I mean, this is really more than 50% of the digital communications I receive. Either the person, I really don't think that most people take time to reread what they're digitally communicating even once. And so more often than not, either not only is it grammatically incorrect, but they've skipped words, they've left something out, they've misspelled, or whatever the problem is. So with the result that I can't understand what the, excuse my French, hell they're saying, or they haven't reread and thought about what they are saying, so the communication is ambiguous.
Yeah.
And so as a result of this happening in the majority of the digital communications that I see, I find myself rereading what I'm digitally communicating to make sure that, I'm proofreading and all that stuff. And so this is like a catch-22 for me, because I find that that process is taking like a lot of time. And I feel like I'm being inefficient, but I don't know what else to do. So this is a weird double bind.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me share some thoughts around that. Now, in all of our communications, and for all of you, as we think about coaching, our first interaction is usually always virtual first versus face-to-face first, right? We're emailing someone, we're building, and that is the new first impression. It's not when you just meet someone. We have a digital relationship. We have a digital persona well before someone meets us. So there are already perceptions being made. Now, in all of our communications, we are answering 2 questions that guide the signals we read from others, whether they're ambiguous or not, and the signals we send. The first is who has more or less power. Now, if someone has more power, we may be more careful, we may be more formal. You know, if we're in a situation where we have more power, we may be a bit more informal, intimate. You know, I've seen senior leaders be able to use an emoji as a way to build that connection and break the ice in communication. The second question is, how much do we trust each other? Are we very close in trust? We're longtime colleagues, or have we never met before? And this really guides often the level of ambiguity and anxiety. Often the 4 types of anxiety that are often created are brief emails, passive aggressive or seemingly passive aggressive, even if they're not, like the Sarah John example, slow or no responses, and a change in formality. When someone goes from, you know, writing emails saying, hey, Erica, you know, can you get this done? Thanks so much, to, you know, dear Erica, best regards. And you wonder what's going on here, or why the sudden shift. I recommend 2 things here. One is, Paula, we have to always, you know, when we're on the receiving end, you know, assume the best intent if we're feeling that ambiguity. One study in a science journal showed that we tend to misinterpret the tone in emails up to 50% of the time, even with friends and family members. We don't know this as well with our own husbands and families and kids and such. And secondly, make sure that you're always asking yourself, number 1, am I using the right media for the complexity of this? If it's high complex, switch to a phone call. A phone call is worth 1,000 emails. Secondly, am I using the right tone? Did I give others what they needed? And last but not least, if I'm not getting what I need, make sure to switch that channel or adjust to really fit what you need in the situation, whether it's a quick conversation or beyond. I'd love to go to Liz next to have her share some more color on her challenge. If she's still on, I know she had to go to Comcast. Yeah.
Yes. It's the idea of which channel did we use? Because if we're communicating, I'd like to go back to the channel we were using. And then I've got to remember, okay, exactly what did it look like, feel like, and all of that. And I can sometimes my instincts are not accurate. So I've got to really check them out, which is, you know, to Paula's point, that too is time consuming.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in today's session, I'm going to talk about, in my new book, Digital Body Language, I talk about how we all, similar to different traditional body language styles, we all have a digital body language style. On one end, there are those that are digital natives. They think of them as the clients that love the quick text, the IM. They hate voicemail. They hate phone calls out of the blue. They are virtual first versus in-person first. They have frequent short messages. They want the bullet points. The other end of the spectrum are those I call digital adapters. These are individuals that have more reluctance with the new technology. They prefer that phone call, the longer conversations. They can't wait to get back to the face-to-face interaction. And what we have to remember is to check ourselves. What is our natural style? And how do we connect with those that are different from us as well? This can make or break sales, like winning clients right now. Those simple cues of, are we giving them what they need and their communication style and what will best serve them, and adapting and also checking our bias around what they need and asking them. Secondly, when it comes to which channel to use, I like to say there's a 3-part rule. The first is complexity, the second is urgency, and the third is familiarity. If it's high complex, have that video call or that phone call, but make sure to have a clear agenda. Send the information in advance. Don't waste people's time catching them up. If it's low complex, email, IM, text, you name it. Second, urgency. Do you need it in 5 minutes or 5 days? You know, I've seen people get so annoyed if someone's a serial texter and texting them non-important or urgent information. So understanding that each channel has an implied urgency level. And last but not least, familiarity. Again, do you know this person for years or for a few days? And I'm going to share a toolkit at the end that actually has these best practices. So it can be helpful for you to set your own norms and boundaries as well. So you're not responding to everything all the time, but also to have that quick check-in with clients, and also adapting to how to sell to new clients today. Let's go to one more, Jim. And if you have a pending question, because I want to keep going in the content, make sure to raise your hand and I'll make sure to call on you to make sure we can capitalize. Oh, it looks like maybe we'll go to Jim and then we'll go to CB. Jim, want to go next? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to hear your share. I think in last the event. My question is about when we have more and more Zoom meeting, the web meeting, when we have the working from home or in the hybrid workplace. Some people, they insist the 738-50 rule, the communication rule, which means the visual communication part is the most crucial. So some people, they insist you should encourage all the participants in the Zoom meeting to turn on the video and to still use the eye contact, the same body language, to watch out the body language as we have the communication in the face-to-face. But it's very interesting to hear your share in last event. Some people, they ignore the background or the scenario of each individual, because you cannot expect everybody to stick on their eye contact on the video camera, because that will make people get tired, and maybe they will switch their eye contact to the reading the article or the paper. So my question is, do you think the 738-50 is still work when we have the web meeting?
Great question. You know, and Lisa's bringing in some really good insights here. And I want to get a little more familiar with the role that you shared, because I don't know all the details of it. But I don't think there's one fast rule. I mean, I've seen industries like financial services where they've all gone back to Zoom audio. They're not doing video calls unless the clients want to do it. And then I've seen other industries like professional services, companies like Deloitte and Accenture, all video all the time. I don't think it's I think that it depends on the organization and the team. And certain industries have different spectrums on this. And so I would actually argue that what really matters is maybe not specific quotients, but really clear norms around when you need video and when you don't. For example, I've seen teams set some rules. If it's a complex deep dive discussion, we have video on for our staff meetings, but in our client external meetings, but maybe for certain one-on-ones internally, it's not required to avoid that screen fatigue. Or for example, in a team meeting where you have a speaker like me, you know, everyone comes on video for the first 5 minutes to create an emotional connection. And then they don't need to be on a video for the 30-minute presentation. And then they come on video for the gallery view, because I can't see everyone as well. Mm-hmm. And so again, I think we're in the wild, wild west of this, but the norms are going to look a little different depending on the group. I think what the question we have to ask ourselves is less of when video on and off versus what are when are the cases where seeing each other face to face will improve the work outcome and deepen trust. And there's a lot of cases where trust is often already built and it's not as required. And we're not also seeing each other's body language. We're looking at our own camera and no one else. So those are two factors I would bring up. I want to go to CB, and then I want to move forward with the content to make sure I share the best practices in the discussion. So CB, you want to share your question or comment?
Yeah, so I wondered in your research, how much your profession relates to the time you spend on your emails and being concerned about accuracy, how much age relates to this, and how much your personality type relates to it. So for example, an introvert trying to speak by email, Paula is an attorney. She's going to pay attention to every dot and every T crossed.
Yes.
And so she's going to be bothered by, as she said, inaccuracies in email. However, if she's receiving an email from a young client who is an IM person who just like, should she be concerned about it? Should she let her, her profession not rule her interpretation? I think these are important factors. And I wonder what your research told you about them.
Absolutely. They're incredibly important factors. Let me answer the one around sort of, our industry and generational. And then I have a slide specifically to introvert and extrovert and some of these slide differences that I'm going to go through in a minute. Now, I'll share an example that I think will bring this to life. We all know that different industries have different norms around this. If you're a lawyer, I mean, you've been taught to write in a certain trade in a specific format, and it makes or breaks. It's the legal profession, frankly. But there are also teams in tech that speak in emojis, GIFs, and memes on Slack messages, and that's how they entirely communicate. Hackers, I've seen Slack groups of developers. And it's all shorthand and acronyms, and someone from the outside may not understand a word of it. And so I think this just goes to show, just like traditional body language styles, where in America we may handshake and in Japan we may bow, we have different digital body language styles across industries, across companies, and even across different age groups. Now, what I found around the generations is that we are not all the same. And it's not just millennial or Gen Z, right? It really is a spectrum of digital natives to adapters, where the digital natives may have that preference for much more informal language and digital tools first, whereas the digital adapters may be much more formal and prefer that in-person or traditional body language first. I want to share a story that I think will remind us all that the rules are changing, but we also have to adapt and get comfortable being uncomfortable. This is a story from my book. Brad, who's a leader of a team, had two direct reports. One was Allie and one was Dave. And when he saw Allie's team's Slack channel and how they were doing work, which was really how they work now in this digital format, it was beautiful. Perfect punctuation, bullet points, bold and underlined headings. He knew exactly what was going on in the progress. When he looked at Dave's channel, it was GIFs, memes, IMs. He had no idea what was going on. And he was actually concerned, like, were they just hoking around and not doing the work? And Dave was a bit younger. Dave often joked that Brad was the boomer of the community, even though he was not a boomer, but it's just an example. But one of the things that Brad realized is that the work output and the quality was the same between Allie and Dave's team. And if he were to force Dave to be more corporate, he would actually be losing the authenticity and the creativity of that team. And so I'm not in any way saying we should be less professional, right? But some of the standards may be adapted. And there may be certain cases where even that emoji or that simple informality can actually deepen trusted relationships, especially with your clients that are digital natives in the ways that we're working today. So thank you, CB, for that. I want to go into a few best practices from my new book, Digital Body Language. And then we're going to leave some ample time. I'm going to try to go through this pretty quickly, only to leave some time at the end for broader other questions. So as I go through this, don't worry, there's a toolkit at the end that you can download that's a summary of the slides as well. I want to start with the first 5 key principles I talk about when it comes to having good body language as an individual, as a coach, as a leader. The first is brevity creates confusion. The pressure to communicate quickly can lead all of us to take shortcuts, to sometimes leave out context altogether. A leader I know, Adriel, she sends a no subject calendar invitation to her teammate, Brian. Brian had heard about budget cuts that week, so he thought he was about to get fired. And while that story may seem astronomical, we have to remember that brevity can create a lot of confusion, and to never confuse brief with clear, especially as a coach, where our first impression communication truly matters. Second key principle is to have a communicate your mind mindset. Remember that in all of your messages, your job is to role model good, unambiguous expectations and norms, always clarifying What is the ask? What is the priority level? Why do you and others need this? And how are you feeling about this? Are you grateful? Are you happy? Did you say that? Remember, if someone stays up all night to work on something and in the office, they could see the smile on your face, the relief. If they just get a K period or a THX period, they may not feel as valued visibly. So being thoughtful about even the tone and punctuation we use is important. Writing great work here or thank you so much goes a long way versus the TX in a message. Now, here are 4 different versions of okay. And I want to do a quick exercise. The first okay in all caps with an exclamation at the end. For some can feel like shouting, for others can feel like excitement, and for others can feel like urgency in an email. I want you to go into the chat and tell me, how do you interpret the all caps okay? Let's hear from every single one of you. Is it shouting? Is it excitement? Or is it urgency? The second okay with a period at the end in a text, for some, again, passive aggressive in text, for others, good grammar. The third okay with multiple question marks, for some this feels accusatory, for others a simple question. And the fourth okay, for some it's friendly and others it's immature. Again, what I'm loving coming in from the chat is just how different this can feel. And of course it depends on the person, but for some this is excitement and for others it's frustration or shouting. And so I think that's a good reminder to all of us that we have to check our bias and not assume that others will get what we mean, to really choose and be maniacally clear. The third key principle is what I call hold your horses. Now, what I mean here is less haste equals more speed. As a coach, you want to prioritize thoughtfulness over hastiness. You don't want to reward the fastest person who responds to an email or the quickest person who jumps in on a video call. Again, in sales, speed matters, but remember to be thoughtful as well. Remembering not to rush our messages shows our steadfastness and our thoughtfulness. On the other end of the spectrum, we have to manage our anxiety if we don't hear back from people, which happens. Let me share the anxiety level curve. If we don't hear back, we may start to wonder what's going on. Then we might get a little angry. Then we might read into a conversation for clues. And then finally, we assume they forgot and follow up. If you're dealing with struggling to hear back from people, I recommend a few things. Number one, set a clear response time in the email. With teams I work with, we have acronyms. 4H means I need this in 4 hours. 2D means I need this in 2 days. If you don't have that power level, it's okay, but you can share a response time expectation. If you haven't heard back, make sure to change the subject line in your follow-up. And if you still haven't, switch to the right medium. You might be working with a digital native who's actually going to be much better with a quick text versus an adapter who really prefers that thoughtful presentation and that formal video call meeting. The fourth key principle, which we all know has always mattered as a coach, and is something we've all built and skilled our clients on, is assume the best intent. More than ever, with the lack of tone and body language, we have to remember that Tom, Greg, and Jenny may have been rushing, may have thought it wouldn't offend us. And so giving others the benefit of the doubt and knowing that that quick phone call is worth those 1,000 back and forth emails as well. Last but not least, and this goes back to CB's question, is the fifth principle that I believe is more important than ever, is to truly think about how you're finding your voice in digital body language and how you're creating a space for others to find their voice. Let me give you some examples of just the differences in the ways that we work today. Now, introverts really thrive with open lines of communication. They don't just want meetings. They like clear agendas so that they have time to think and process before the meeting. Don't interrupt their speaking. Think like that TV show host. Maybe have a forced order. Say we're going to start with Sam, Jenny, and Tom, but then say I'm going to give everyone 5 minutes to reflect first, and then here's the order. Or have everyone share in the chat first and then call on people. So especially introverts have had time to digest their thinking and write their ideas first. Extroverts need airtime, so manage it. Use breakout rooms, use pre-meeting brainstorms, use that moderator, the hand raising tool. Again, a TV show host cuts people off in a debate if they're going too long. And actually a good facilitator today does the same thing. I want to share a story. I know one leader in her staff meetings now, she always sends an agenda 48 hours in advance of the meeting with questions she wants her team to be ready to answer in the first 5 minutes of the meeting. Then in the first 5 minutes, everyone shares their answers in the chat tool or on a mural whiteboard first. And then she calls on people with the most diverse or different perspectives. This does a few things. First, she's hearing more from her introverts than she ever heard from them in the office, because body language biases often cause the extroverts to have more of a voice then. Secondly, research shows if you get everyone engaged in the first 5% of a meeting, they're much more likely to participate for the remaining 95% of the meeting. And everyone's writing their thoughts. So then by calling on people with diverse or different perspectives, she's avoiding groupthink in the discussion as well. The second key attribute is digital natives to adapters. And I talked already about this, but I think it's important for all of us to really understand where are we on this spectrum and how do we connect with those that are similar, but also different from us in today's world. I actually have an assessment in my book, Digital Body Language, where you can assess yourself and your clients on these styles. But I'd love for you to go into the chat now and share, where would you map yourself? Are you a native? Are you an adapter? Are you in the middle? I call them the digital chameleons. Remember, natives have to be a bit patient. Remember, not everyone is on this all the same. Adapters have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, ask for help, and chameleons can be a bit of the translators. And again, I think it's great to see some of the differences in perspectives. Last but not least, cross-culturally, there are differences. Again, just like in Japan, where we may ask someone to do something on a Zoom call and they may say yes, but yes may mean I acknowledge you said you asked me, not yes, I will do it in order to save face. Versus in the US, they may say yes and agree to complete something. There are different digital norms across cultures. And I have an entire chapter in my book on cultures, generations, and genders, but I want to share some common themes. Please see these as themes and not as stereotypes at all. In Eastern cultures, much more formal digital communication, title, surname, more context. Western cultures, much more to the point and direct. I want to share one story. I know a leader based in New York. She has a global team and she has colleagues in London, Buenos Aires, and Sydney, Australia. She found her colleague in Buenos Aires was not engaging effectively on video calls. At first, she thought he was multitasking. Then she thought he didn't care. Finally, she said, I should value him visibly and check my bias. And so she sent him a quick IM and he wrote, I'm having such a hard time translating 3 different English accents when English is not my native language, an American, British, and Australian accent. This caused them to start using closed captioning and the chat tool more, and it made a significant difference in how they engaged. Last but not least, one other key factor I want to mention, which again, we could have a whole session on, and I have a whole chapter on, is around some of the gender differences. And what the studies have found is similar to traditional gender biases, like up-talking and voice pitch. There are digital gender biases, but I would argue that a lot of the research on digital communication has not sped up to the gender spectrum. So there's a lot of work to do there. But what the research has shown is there is a masculine tone of digital body language and a feminine tone. And we tend to read into these. And that's not just man or woman. There are women that have a masculine tone. There are men that have a feminine tone of digital body language. One study actually found that when a younger female used multiple emojis in workplace emails compared to a man at any rank level in that same workplace, the woman was more likely to be interpreted as incompetent. The man was more likely to be interpreted as casual or friendly. So again, understanding that these exist, navigating them, helping our clients build these skills is so critical in the ways that we work today. Now, I know that we are short on time. We only have about 14 minutes left, and I want to get into questions in a minute. So one of the things I'm going to do is share a summary of some of these slides. And if we have time for more of them, we can do that in a minute. But if you are starting to have questions, please go ahead and share them in the chat. And I'm going to ask Holly to maybe help me collect any questions coming in so that we can get through as many of them as possible during the discussion. Before I close, I want to share a few final things. We've talked today about many individual principles as coaches, but in my research and my work, I also share what I call the 4 laws of digital body language that will allow us to connect despite our differences. We know this is a lot. This is exhausting with different punctuation and tone and cues and natives and adapters. But what I share in my content is 4 laws that will allow you to connect no matter the distance, no matter the person, no matter the silo. And I think that these are critical for coaches to practice, to role model, but also to upscale our clients on. The first law is value visibly. And in today's world, I like to say valuing visibly is not just the head nod, the handshake. It's valuing time, inboxes, and schedules. It's acknowledging those individual differences, introvert, extrovert, adapter, native, and beyond. Second, communicate carefully. I'll never forget getting a message saying, do you want to speak Wednesday or Thursday? And another person's response was yes. Reading messages carefully is the new listening. Writing clearly is the new empathy. The third law is collaborate confidently. Remembering confidence today is not, getting everyone into a team dinner together. It's saying what you'll do and doing what you'll say, prioritizing that thoughtfulness over hastiness, especially with digital groupthink causing a lot of rushing and a hamster wheel. And last but not least, trust totally. And trust totally is really all about how do we build trust no matter the distance? How do we create that bias of just, who's involved and how they can commit? Even simple things like designing for psychological safety, creating that space for everyone to speak up, making sure that everyone is sharing wins of the week, challenges of the week in team discussions, not assuming someone will share, but having those regular, frequent interactions. One thing that I found is, even with my coaching clients, I have to have more frequent and shorter check-ins with them. Instead of the 1 hour call once a month or twice a month, actually, 2 calls that are 20 minutes each, twice a week or every week can actually be more effective to create that level of engagement and respect. In a toolkit I'm going to be sharing with all of you, I have a guide to some questions that you can use. And this is also in the book that will allow you to really see how you can use each of these 4 principles in a very effective way. And so I'd love for you to close. I'd love for you to go into the chat and feel free to share what's one action you're taking away. Is it value visibly, communicate carefully, or collaborate confidently, or all 4? And I know in a minute I want to leave time for questions, but I hope that you were really able to learn some key tips and tricks today. I not only have keynotes and workshops on this, but I've written a whole book on it. It's available Amazon, Barnes & Noble's, Audible. So I hope that you'll check it out. It's at dblbook.com. I also have an entire course for trainers and coaches to buy to actually learn these principles and learn how to adopt them and bring these skills to their teams, to their clients as well, and become adept at it. So if you're interested in really becoming a master at digital body language, check out my course at dblcourse.com. And last but not least, I wanted to mention that I am growing out a whole certification program and have already built up a small group of certified digital body language trainers. And so if you're interested in, being a master trainer or a consultant or bringing on these skills to your clients, please email our COO. I'll make sure to share it in the chat. We'd love to work with you to bring these skills to your clients or to have you come work with our clients to really scale out the importance of digital body language in the world that we're living in now. So in a minute, let's start the Q&A and I'll pass it back to Holly to help me moderate that to get through as many questions as possible. But I really want to thank you all for joining today. I want to close with where I started. This is the moment not to revert back to coaching pre-pandemic. It's the moment to be more creative, more inclusive, more connected, and leverage the virtual connection to reach more clients, to reimagine how you sell to clients, to bring people together that you never could before. I want to thank ACEC for role modeling, connecting intelligently today. And I'll close with one final question. How will you lead digitally for all of those counting on your wisdom, your creativity, and your heart? Thank you so much again. And let's see, we'll pass it back to the team to start the Q&A, and I'll make sure all of the links are in the chat as well.
Oh my goodness, Erica, thank you. I think we should have set aside about 4 hours for this. So much information. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback. People learned so much. They're downloading your book as we speak. Really good stuff. One question, and I actually asked this, so sorry, folks, when you're the moderator, you get to pick the first question. For those that want to kind of do a step back, like an overhaul, because I think what we're all experiencing is 18 months of trying to pedal hard and catch up. And, maybe our digital presence, our body language has not really been put forth with thought and care because we were pedaling so fast, right? Where do you recommend people start? If you just want to step back and say, man, I need to reevaluate all of this.
Yeah. There's so many angles to this question, but for coaches, let's get really practical. Your video presence. Research shows that we make a first impression of someone face-to-face within the first 7 milliseconds. I would argue that they're making that first impression in the first email you write, or your digital persona online. They're Googling you, they're checking you out on LinkedIn. And so really asking yourself, have you upgraded your digital presence online? What they read, before I hire anyone, a consultant, a babysitter, like I Google them, and really taking that step to understand, are we giving others what they need to understand, to build that first impression now, because it is digital first. Secondly, video meetings are that first sales call. And so asking ourselves, have we upgraded our video background? Are we clear? Even buying a simple ring light and a camera. I actually know a digital stylist that can set up your background, your virtual background. So if you want to learn more about that, I can connect you to that person. I think these are things that actually matter. They signal that executive presence, even just making sure to look into the camera when you're connecting with someone for the first time, and obviously checking their cues, but remembering when you're presenting, about 60% of the time, I argue we should be looking into the camera when we're presenting. If we're having a one-on-one, that might be a bit different. And last but not least, I think more important than ever, unleash the power of creativity. I'll give you an example. I know one coach who now, when he's selling to new clients, he has one client that loves him, and he zooms in that existing client to talk for 5 minutes to a prospect about how much the coach has impacted his life. That would have never happened in the traditional sales call, but we can actually, reimagine who we're bringing in and how we are to connect with clients today. And whether that's the Zoom webinar format like ACEC is doing, again, be creative here, like tap into your own intuition and creativity, and whatever that is, and opportunities will emerge. So those are my quick tips.
Fantastic. Let's see, where can I find the handouts to download? We'll send out Jane a link for where that can be found. That's a follow-up. Let me see what else. Brilliant, learn so much, basically stop and think before I start interactions. Yes. Walking away with a clear idea of how I get the results I get and the actual steps I'm taking that matter. This was so valuable. So fantastic. Anybody just jump in with your question. Don't feel like you need to put something in the chat. We're happy to just raise your hand and I'll call on you if you've got something you want to ask. Erica, one of the things I will ask, when we first joined, when it was just you and I on the screen, I commented about the fact that your background is blurred out and didn't you want your book to show up? So why don't you talk to us a little bit about the value of the blurred background and what you're trying to accomplish with that?
Yeah, I actually, I have to practice what I preach. And even as coaches, we're teaching communication skills. We have to practice what we preach. So I hired a digital stylist. I'm happy to share in the chat to help guide me. I'm happy to share his info in the chat to guide me around building my brand, digitally. And he helped me set up. I have a ton of tools around me. I have a 4K camera. I have 2 huge lights. I have a whole setup here. And research shows that, what you really want to do is you don't want people paying attention to the background. You want people paying attention to you in a presentation. Obviously, there are subconscious cues. And I think CB's and Holly, yours are great backgrounds as well, because they're warm and inviting, but they're not distracting. The intention here is not for people to be trying to read the background, but they know they can tell the book's there and they may be thinking about it. But they're really focused on me and engaging with me in the conversation. But I'm going to share. I'm going to share my digital stylist LinkedIn profile, and if you are interested in working with him, I highly recommend it.
Fantastic.
It works. People notice.
We have a question here. If you could say more about the certification.
Absolutely. So I have a certification program where coaches can do two things. Number one, they can be certified as a digital body language coach, which will allow them to bring our content. And we have an assessment tool. We have a 360 format around this, bring it to their clients, and also work with us if they'd like on our consulting engagements and coaching and training engagements. And so if you're interested in that, please email our COO. We're really, you can probably imagine it's been very exciting and very busy. We're trying to bring in more coaches because everyone needs this skill now. And so I hope that you'll consider it if you want to build your repertoire in this for your own clients, or would like to bring on new business yourself working with us. Fantastic.
Good. Anything else? We've got 1 minute for a real quick question or a comment. CB, do you have anything you'd like to chime in?
Yes, I put in the chat about how to find out more information about ACEC and membership, and I'm going to put it in again so that everybody can see it.
Fantastic.
We have a lot of members on the call today, and I'm happy to see that. Of course, I'm very biased that these are the best coaches in the world, but who am I to say?
And it's fun to be associated with this group. These are definitely my people. So Erica, thank you so very much. I haven't quite finished your book yet, but now I feel compelled to get back in there and start working it hard. And it's been really delightful. So thank you again for your time. Thank you everyone for joining us, and stay tuned for whatever's next with ACEC.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, CB, so much for having me. And thank you all for engaging today.
Have a good day, everybody.
Holly, do you want to mention the fireside chat that's coming up just for an inside scoop?
So we're putting together a members only event where we are going to talk about some of the challenges that have come about as a result of all the pandemics that we've been experiencing in the last 18 months, and just offer a forum for conversation. We're not coming with any pre-baked solutions to problems, but there's many different topics, how to grow your business, how to think about, what the leaders we're coaching need differently today versus what they may have needed 2 years ago, etc. So those are occurring on October 22nd and 29th at 9 a.m. Mountain Time, and those are member only events. So for those of you that are members, I hope you'll join us for at least one, if not both sessions. And for those who are not members, it's a really good reason to get in there, join, and become part of the conversation.
Great.
Fantastic. Everybody have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.